Hello, friends. Kyle here. Thanks for joining us on North Star Daily. And it's election season for those who celebrate. My wife will call it spooky season, but it's election season to me. Just 11 weeks away and moments from early voting. And we've got our first polling, KSTP USA, Survey USA polling out just last night, showing if in the gubernatorial race, Senator Amy Klobuchar, 52% over Lisa Demuth, the House Speaker, 36%. Margin of error about 4.6%, and closer on the Senate side. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan leading sports broadcaster Michele Tafoya, 46-41. Let's double check that. I was right, 46-41. You got to like that. With the tarantula tosser coming in at 1%, by the way, 12% undecided in the gubernatorial, 11% in the Senate. I guess the tarantula tosser gets that other 1%. And anyways, that's closer than I think many expected, though the Survey USA poll was off in the primary. So, take that for what it's worth. But to break it down and look ahead to the general election and talk about what Michele Tafoya needs to do if she's going to upset Peggy Flanagan is GOP strategist Andy Brehm. And Andy, of course, used to be a spokesperson for Senator Norm Coleman, one of the last Republicans to win statewide in Minnesota. So, also, Andy, importantly, Star Tribune publisher Steve Groh's favorite columnist. We're going to talk about that. Andy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here. I appreciate the introduction. I'm not sure Steve would agree with that, but he's been very fair to me at the Star Tribune, and I do appreciate that.
You're a valuable resource, and he knows it. And I know it too, which is why you're here joining me today. So let's talk about these poll numbers with Michele Tafoya. Obviously, the KSTP Survey USA poll was a little off in the primary, so let's not get too excited. But seeing those numbers, what's your takeaway today?
I mean, again, that poll has been off before. I think there's no question this is a competitive race, and that's what we're seeing. So, it's been a long time since Republicans have been competitive statewide and had candidates that are competitive. We have that now. So, I think there are a lot of people that haven't really tuned in. A lot of people haven't made up their minds. Again, the polling shows that. But as people get to know these candidates, they're going to say, hey, these are very palatable alternatives to the status quo. And Minnesotans, I don't know anyone in Minnesota who thinks the status quo is good. Everybody wants change. So the question is, do you want to elect strong leaders from another party that have a different way of doing things, or really the same old thing, particularly in the Senate race? I mean, you've got Peggy Flanagan, who has been the incumbent lieutenant governor for 8 years. I mean, she's, Tim Walz's deputy and close ally. So if there's ever a vote for the status quo, she certainly would be it.
Obviously, you and I, we both know progressives, and they don't always see it that way. But it is an interesting thing that no one sees this, the us being in the right direction. So if you make the case, I got some progressive listeners, make the case that Tafoya is making about how Republicans would change things and what she's going to bring to the table that the lieutenant governor isn't.
Well, I mean, I think if you're a hard left progressive and you want bigger government, you want higher taxes, you want a Minnesota economy that continues to weaken, then Peggy Flanagan is your person. There's no question about that. And I'll give her credit. I think she's honest about who she is. And I just think that that's out of line with what most Minnesotans, mainstream Minnesotans, believe. But listen, Michele Tafoya, first of all, is a talented businesswoman. She's a very articulate leader, and she knows herself well. So it's a breath of fresh air. And I think when people look, do you want a hard left progressive that's been endorsed by Bernie Sanders representing you in the United States Senate, or do you want a really moderate Republican representing you in the Senate? And I think the choice is going to be clear.
You were a spokesman, so you, of course, know about such things as staying on message. What do you think of Tafoya's messaging so far? Getting a little bit of trouble, I would say, last week. I will say I got text as soon as the clip came out. We'll play it here in just a second. And another person, when I mentioned I was talking to you today, the first thing they said was, didn't Michele Tafoya step in it last week? So a little bit of her Fox News appearance, and then I'll get your reaction.
Yeah. I have talked to hundreds of voters in Minnesota who have told me, gosh, I went on vacation this summer. I didn't want to tell people where I was from because it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And it's true.
Is being embarrassed from Minnesota a winning strategy statewide?
I think she's very candid and is being honest about the state of things. Clearly, she loves Minnesota. Otherwise, she wouldn't be representing the state to be in the United States Senate or even living here. I think she has the financial wherewithal probably to live wherever she wants. But I would consider myself in that category. I love this state. I believe in it. But the state of things is horribly unacceptable. And sometimes when you love something, as we love some people, we have to call them out when we see them failing. So, I think these gotcha things and, oh, didn't she step in it? She's just telling it like it is. And she clearly loves the state and wants to serve it. But like me, and I think quite frankly, like a lot of Minnesotans, even a lot of Democrats, they go, this is not a state. The state is not in a state today that I'm necessarily proud of. Let's get it in a state, over the next few years where we can feel that way again. So I don't think she's not proud of Minnesota. I'm proud of Minnesota. We love the state, but it's not rocket science to suggest it's not doing very well. And certainly nationally, our reputation is in the gutter. That's just a fact. If you don't think that, then you're kind of living in denial.
I'm not in denial as much as I would say, like, right, I go to Naples, I see my dad, I talk to his friends. They just watch Fox News. Their experience of Minnesota is not well-balanced or nuanced. And so when they go, Tampon Tim, and I'm like, there's so much more to it than that, right? So I get frustrated. First off, I doubt it's hundreds. It's probably tens, and then is that the thing that I want my, a senator, this U.S. senator, to go out and say, hey, people are embarrassed to live here. Like, let's talk about how great it is, as she did. And she did. I clipped that, right? That is a little gotcha. She did talk about everything you said, how much she loves living here and choosing to raise a family. But I want more promotion and less negativity. That's my North Star today, I guess.
Well, and let's talk about that for a minute, because I would agree with you. I think your attitude in life is very important. And I love Minnesota. I can talk on and on about the things about our state that are positive. We have it's a wonderful, kind state full of really nice people, hardworking people. We have a talent pool, I would suggest, that's better than anywhere else. But I think one of the things that has gotten Minnesota in trouble is we haven't been able to look ourselves in the mirror. We all have to do that in our lives at times. When things aren't going well, we got to say, hey, I got to audit myself. I got to look at how I'm doing and maybe make some changes. That's all those of us that are suggesting there's a problem here are asking of the state. I think kind of a blind positivity, not recognizing that we do have to compete with other states. That's the way the world works, is not negativity necessarily, it's reality. And so I think if you really love something and you see it failing, you want to help it do better, not just kind of enable it down a bad path. So I do think Minnesotans, again, we can love our state, we can be proud of our state, at the same time be real about that we're going through a phase right now that's not so hot.
And that's what, right? So she says the first part, here's the second part, because it distracts from what her point was going to be.
About these people leaving, businesses fleeing. You're talking about philanthropy, innovation, all kinds of taxpayer-funded things leaving because taxpayers are leaving. This is untenable. We're going to save Minnesota.
Right. I think that's a winning message that got missed by talking about people being embarrassed from being here. I think it distracted from an actual message she could have made.
Maybe, but it might resonate with people saying, listen, I don't want to see Minnesota in the news for hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud. We want to see our state in the news for different things. So I think she's being candid. She's being real. And I think that's honestly what people want from their politicians. So, again, I don't necessarily have a problem with what she said. I think she said it out of love. And, when we love people, sometimes it's called tough love. And I think that's what that is. And I think it will resonate with a lot of people who feel the same way. Because if you don't love something, you actually don't really care if it's not doing well. You just move, or you say, I don't really care. But when you love something and you see it struggling, you engage, as she has clearly done.
So that clip actually gets the interviewer brings up Norm Coleman, Senator Coleman, as the last. I think it was Tim Pawlenty that was actually the last to win statewide, but I'm old and I'm forgetting at this point. But Norm Coleman is a man you worked for.
In 2008, that was pretty much.
That's right. That's right. It was very close, and I have a story I'll have to tell you about that someday. But statewide, as somebody who worked with Senator Coleman and watched that transition from Democrat mayor of St. Paul to Republican, and now we're looking at, I was talking about Randy Kelly. We're 20 years removed from Randy Kelly being the mayor of St. Paul. And imagine we elected Republicans in the last 2 decades in the state and in this city. What's the hill? What is this? So anyways, Tafoya mentioned she'd talked to the senator. What is the senator and the I guess 2 questions here. What's the senator telling Tafoya? And then second, complaints about the DC influence versus talking to local people that talk about state issues. How do people manage those?
Well, you're aging me because Norm Coleman has been a senator for a long time, so that job was a long time ago. And I do keep in touch with Norm. I adore him, but I have no idea what he's advising Michele Tafoya on. Although he's wise to listen to him because he's a great politician, was a very effective leader. When you look at what he did in St. Paul, it was pretty impressive. And when he was in the Senate, I worked for him. That guy worked hard. I'll tell you, he was nonstop. He wore me out, and I was 21 at the time, 22. So. Anyway, I think that's good they're talking, but you get getting national support is not a bad thing. Democrats have been very good at it, and you need it takes fundraising to get your message out, and she's clearly done a good job with that. So again, I have no problem with it. It gets back to what I said earlier. I think when things aren't going well, you need to look inward, and the Republican Party in this state has put forward candidates that were just totally unacceptable. I mean, if I have I didn't vote for Royce White. I wouldn't vote for him ever. But now we've changed, and I give Republicans a lot of credit in Minnesota. We get beat up quite a bit, and we bucked the president's endorsement for governor, and are supporting a very palatable candidate for Senate. So I think the game has just totally changed here. And you talk about saying positive things about Minnesota. One thing I would say is voters here are very smart. They're very engaged. They're open to changing their minds. I think that's a very healthy thing. So now, again, the game has changed with having these 2 on top of this ticket. And I think people sense that. I haven't talked to anyone who isn't saying, sure, I'm going to give them a look.
I joked, that's a great transition, what you said there about taking a beating. I joked at the beginning about being Steve Grove's favorite columnist. And before we go, we haven't had a chance to connect much since you started writing for the Strib. And I understood what he meant by that, right? That the Star Tribune has a voice, and it sounds very similar, everything, and they need the outside opinion. You need somebody to come in and say, hey, like you've said this entire time, sometimes tough love is saying the hard things, right? So what is that experience like being the Republican voice for the Minnesota Star, and how bad is your email on a daily basis?
Well, it's not my day job. It's a fun thing to do in my spare time, and I was honored they asked me to do it. I've written for the paper since I was a high school student, submitting letters to the editor, so it has a special place in my heart. And I think the paper's been very fair to me. They don't edit my opinions. I've said some things that many of their more liberal readers haven't been too happy with, and I hear from that from time to time, but that's okay. I'm a fan of us having conversations, and we are in such a polarized time, I think, in part because people just aren't talking to each other. I'll talk to anybody. I used to live in St. Paul. Most of my friends there were, liberal Democrats, and we loved each other, and we talked politics and didn't always agree, but could disagree agreeably. So, it's been fun. I try not to take myself too seriously, and but the paper's been very, very fair to me, and they've published everything that I've presented, and I appreciate it. So I think having vigorous voices and having people of different viewpoints is a good idea. So I appreciate they asked me to do it.
Awesome. Well, I know you've got a heart out. You're a busy man, and I don't want to keep you too much, and we're going to chat much more, but I thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your insight, and I look forward to chatting with you again soon, Andy.
All right. Thank you so much. You have a great day. I appreciate it.